Hello everybody and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips, and I'll start with a couple of announcements. The first thing is today, I hope you get this early in the morning, I'm teaching the class on polycystic ovary syndrome at noon. And I always record these and I put them on a video platform, so if you are watching this on Wednesday thinking, gosh, I would have signed up for that, don't worry, because you can listen to the recording and we'll send you the slides, or you can wait until it's on the video platform, probably next week. So that's the first thing. The diabetes course starts next Monday, June 10th. It's a 4-week series on all types of diabetes, type 1, type 2, gestational, pre-diabetes diets, some of the confusion about diets that people are upset about, should I eat protein and fat, and does sugar cause diabetes, and all that stuff. We're going to sort it all out. 4-week course at noon on Monday for 4 weeks in a row. And food, exercise, and mental health is now on video platform, as is the thyroid class that we taught last week is on video platform too. So, and then lots of great ones coming up soon: cognitive health and Alzheimer's disease, microbiome, cannabis, time management, IBS. We're teaching lots of great courses, new courses here, and then we have like 20 some others that are already online that you can take part in. Another thing I'll mention to you, because I know I get a lot of emails about this and I know you're curious about it, is I chose for the book that we're going to study this month in advanced study, The Medical Medium. I get so many questions about this. And so we're going to do 2 sessions on the medical medium. What is he really saying? Does it have any validity, etc.? So if you're curious about this and all your friends are drinking celery juice or something of that nature, you might want to join us for those sessions. A couple of comments that you guys, or questions that you asked that I thought were worth spending a little bit of time on. And it was in reference to the video clip that I did on the cholesterol study, which appeared to refute what I've been saying and many people have been reporting, which is that having high LDL cholesterol is a risk factor for coronary artery disease and for cardiovascular events. And so one of the questions, and it's a really legitimate question, is, my gosh, how does this stuff end up in medical journals? Why does it get published? And there's a really long answer to it, and I won't give you the real long answer to it because I know you want to hear something interesting about other topics too. But Marcia Angel, who is the former editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, wrote a book called The Truth About Drug Companies. And she talks about the problem in medical journals. And I'm paraphrasing what she said, but she said, it gives me no pleasure at all to report to you that the vast majority of what's published in medical journals right now is bad information. And however, and I think this is very important, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The key is you want to be able to sort out the bad information from the good. So why does the bad information get published? Well, the first thing is that the medical journals themselves are conflicted. Who are their biggest advertisers? Drug companies. And drug companies buy reprints of articles that paint their drugs in a good light because they pass them out to doctors. They give them to the drug reps to pass out to doctors. So you can imagine if it's just a fact of life that this conflict is going to cause medical journals to make bad decisions, because do you really want to print an article that is highly critical of a drug, for example, when Pfizer or Merck or one of these companies might buy 1 million or 2 million reprints of an article that's favorable? So that's an influence, and it's a terrible one, but it's true. Another problem with the medical journals is the peer review process, which involves people who are considered experts in a field doing the peer review, who often have a vested interest in the status quo. So it becomes difficult sometimes to get information contrary to the party line into medical journals. So the peer review process is not what it should be. And then, of course, the research itself is so terrible. I mean, what is being reviewed, I can't even believe they're spending time on it. And a good example is that article that I covered on cholesterol, where it was a badly done article, a research study with a group of very conflicted authors. It should have just been thrown out. It shouldn't have even gone through the review process. But it's like a lot of things in healthcare. We've just plain degenerated to a place where consumers just better be informed. That's why I do this every week. That's why my company provides so much education and that sort of thing. It's because people have to be informed. They just have to be informed. And then the other question that got asked is, in reference to some other clips, was how can doctors recommend high-fat diets and keto diets for weight loss, and what's up with medical professionals giving out bad advice? Well, about diet. Well, medical professionals have been giving out bad advice about a lot of things. Now, when I say medical professionals, I don't mean some of the good doctors out there, because there are some wonderful doctors out there. And I know a lot of them, which is great, because if God forbid anything ever happened to me, I would have people to go to who I could trust. Having said that, in general, and the video clip on Thursday of this week will somewhat address this point, in general, doctors give out bad advice, and medical associations and the government and the drug companies, there's just a lot of bad advice out there. And so let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. You know, we have an opiate epidemic right now because drug reps from Purdue Pharma and some other drug companies told doctors that opiate drugs weren't addictive. And they said, okay, and they started prescribing them. Now, that's not the only reason why we have an opiate epidemic, but it's a big part of it. We have $2 billion worth of vitamin D being sold in the United States every year because one doctor made up this idea of vitamin D deficiency and got the Endocrine Society to buy into it. And the next thing you know, it all starts with one doctor, and this misinformation about vitamin D becomes everybody knows, and everybody's testing for it. I could go on, but I think you get the idea. There are a lot of bad ideas being promoted by doctors who do not do their own research, who do not look into these things. And so that is why I come back to what I do every week on YouTube and what we do every day, all day long in this office, which is to help people become informed because they can't trust doctors to tell them the whole story about these things. And by the way, just to kind of level the playing field here, I try to be pretty fair and balanced in the things that I say. Nobody is saying, why didn't the financial advisor tell me everything? And, you know, they never told me everything about this bank account or buying a house. I mean, you always assume that you have to be responsible when you're getting involved in those kinds of transactions. So I just think that consumers have got to get to the place where they understand that they have to take responsibility for finding out about things and then informing their doctors of what their choices are going to be. And really, unless it's an emergency, and I think you should do anything a doctor tells you to do when they're trying to stop you from bleeding out or put your body back together after an accident. But in the absence of that, you take things under advisement, you do some research, you get back with the people who are making recommendations, you ask them for evidence, you put the burden on the person who's telling you something to provide evidence, and et cetera. All right, so those are some, when 25 or 30 of you ask me the same question, I think I probably should cover it because I figure other people want to know about it too. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater when you're talking about doctors or looking at medical journals. I read them all the time. But I do read them very carefully, and the fact that it's an article is even published in what's considered one of the major journals doesn't necessarily mean that it's valid or that the findings are worth reporting. All right, so let's talk about something that is important, weight loss. Most people in our country need to lose weight. And there is a very inexpensive thing that doesn't take much time that you can do that can actually help you lose weight faster and more permanently. Would you like to know what it is? All right, well, accountability is part of changing any habit, and I don't think anybody's going to disagree about that. And that includes eating habits. One great way to keep yourself accountable is keeping a food journal. It's inexpensive, and studies actually show that it takes an average of about 15 minutes a day, and it makes a difference. According to a new study, people trying to lose weight who entered their food intake in an online program twice a day were more likely to lose weight than weight loss patients who journaled less frequently. So there's a dose-dependent effect. At 6 months of follow-up, the patients who lost 5% or more of their body weight were recording their food intake an average of 2.4 times a day. Those who lost 10% of their baseline weight were recording even more often, an average of 2.7 times a day. Now, on the other hand, participants who lost less weight were recording their intake only 1.6 to 1.7 times per day. Now, this is not the first or only study that's reported that keeping a food journal increases the chance of success for those who are trying to lose weight. One study showed that participants lost more weight during the weeks during which they were the most consistent about food journaling as compared to weeks during which they were the least consistent. Another study showed that using a paper diary was more effective than an electronic one, and that weight loss was highly correlated with the number of entries made. In other words, the more often you wrote stuff down, the better. And I think one of the reasons why a paper diary works so well is people can carry it around with them and it's simple to use. I'm not really a fan of the electronic databases. I think they're cumbersome, and that sooner or later what people are trying to do is wait till they get home and put it online, and then they're trying to recall what happened instead of writing it down contemporaneously. In spite of this and all this good news about it, studies show that journaling tends to decrease over time, and in fact, by 6 months, 34.5% of the participants in the study that I reported in the beginning of this clip here had completely stopped journaling. It's a habit that really works, but it's also one that about a third of the people don't really sustain at all. There can be a lot of reasons for this, and one of the reasons is decreasing motivation, and that's an ongoing problem that I'm not sure anybody's figured out how to solve, is how you keep somebody who needs to lose 50 pounds, for example, motivated 6 months down the road. Everybody's all motivated the day they make the decision to do it, but how motivated you are 6 months later is a different story. But another factor is the tediousness of many programs, some of which require that people enter specific foods, portion sizes, and other information that's difficult to tabulate and track. And it's particularly difficult when people eat out or they eat something that has a lot of things in it. So for lunch today, I had this black bean dish that a friend made for me. It's delicious, but it must have 15 things in it, and it tastes great, but I don't know how the heck you'd ever figure out like how much corn I had and how many beans I had. I mean, it would have taken the whole time I had to eat lunch just to sort it all out on the plate and enter it in. So that type of tedious food journaling doesn't work out very well. We've recommended against it for a long time, and interestingly enough, research backs us up on this. The detail is significantly less important than the fact or the frequency of actually making the entries. A study looking at the effect of keeping food journals on sustained weight loss concluded that recording details about food intake really had no impact. High frequency and high consistency of the entries is actually what made the difference. So I think if people would forget all about trying to figure out how many black beans they had for lunch, and they just basically said, I had a big plate of black bean casserole, that would be a lot more effective. Because you really don't need the calorie count to take a look at your food journal from a macro perspective and say, look, am I eating mostly whole foods? Am I eating too much fat? Am I treating myself too many times every day? That's what the value is of looking at a food journal, not necessarily knowing how many calories were in the black beans at lunch. Consistency is required to meet any goal. I mean, think about it. If you wanted to learn to play the piano, you can't practice once a month. And if you wanted to learn a foreign language, you can't go to class every 6 months, right? So it's not surprising that in the case of journaling, more is better, and consistency makes a lot of difference too. According to results from the Diabetes Prevention Program, for every journal submitted during the first 16 weeks of the program, the chance of meeting the goal of just 7% weight loss increased, translating to a 32% in this cohort better chance of meeting the goal with just 1 month of journaling. Now, I think that's really significant. An added benefit was that in this particular study, the people who journaled also did significantly better at meeting their exercise and activity goals as well. So I personally think that people who are overweight would want to know that one simple task that costs nothing and takes 15 minutes a day could make such a difference in their outcomes. Additionally, most of the research that's been done on food journaling in this way has been done on people who are in weight loss programs or who want to lose weight. But I think the practice is just as beneficial for people who are trying to change their eating and exercise habits for other reasons too. While more emphasis on and support systems for reinforcing consistency are necessary for people to be successful, self-accountability is an inexpensive thing that we know works, that you can start doing right now, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. I mean, you can go to Walmart and get a simple journal and just start writing down every day what you're eating. Believe it or not, I do it every once in a while. The reason I do it is because you guys like to look at my food journal on my blog. You can go to drpampopper.com, and my blog is there, and every so often I post a food journal. And people say, you're a boring eater. I really am, for the most part. I eat pretty simple food, but the point is, it's really good for me to do it once in a while just to keep my own self accountable. And I don't think I'm going to start eating cheeseburgers and french fries anytime soon, but it really does keep me mindful about things like dessert, you know, how often am I doing something like that, etc. So go get a journal. And it's interesting to see what your behavior looks like over a period of time. Not to beat yourself up over it, but just to make changes where necessary. That's what learning to play the piano is all about. You practice and you get better at it. So how about practicing and getting better at eating and exercise? All right, as usual, subscribe if you're not a subscriber. Pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I'll be back to you on Thursday with more news.